Whatever you hope to find, it's a pretty good use of your time. Let's learn and talk about things like squirrels and satin strings. You might think we're bananas. It's the Biggie, Kelly, and your Nana show.
All right, welcome back to the Biggie, Callie, and Nana show. Today we're going to be talking about cult mentality, and we're going to start off with the uncomfortable question. The uncomfortable question for today is, what tendencies or characteristics do you have that are cultish? What are some of those things that you have that you feel really strongly about or have an issue controlling that you have to fight with yourself every day in order to not let it get out of hand? Because we know those are the things that could lead to cult-like behavior. So
well, yeah, because I think it's really easy to have a belief that you believe in and just bury yourself in, we call them like echo chambers, right? With just thoughts like yours that echo back. And once you start doing that, you're getting deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. And if you keep going deeper and deeper into that one belief, it's not too hard for it to become all-consuming. And once it becomes all-consuming and weaves itself into all the fabrics of your existence, it's really easy to start getting extreme.
Yeah, also we need to think about whatever your cult-like behavior is it something that, because you got to have moderation with everything. You don't want to get obsessed with one thing, but at the same time, are there certain cult-like behaviors, and of course the answer is yes, that are unhealthy even to have a little bit of? In other words, is your specific thing that you have, maybe you're not obsessed with it, but maybe it's not healthy to have in the first place, versus another one might be, I like to stay financially stable, so I work. Well, that's pretty normal, that's pretty healthy, but when you do it for 17 hours a day, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have any free time. Versus a cult-like behavior that could be unhealthy from the very beginning is, I am gullible, so I'll let anybody talk me into anything in a heartbeat, and next thing you know, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, and we're all passing out in the field somewhere.
Yeah, I believe, I have a belief, and in everything that fits my schema, I absorb, and that's all I listen to, and I just go deeper and deeper into that. Because that's actually easy to do, because let's be real, people are uncomfortable being challenged, right? That's cognitive dissonance, which we'll talk about probably more.
So, I gave the question. Do one of you guys want to start off, or do you want me to go ahead? Because I've already came up with my answer.
You have come up with your answer?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm interested in Biggie's cultish
All right.
behaviors.
My cultish behavior is certainly, I guess you could say, rebellism. However you would want to classify that. I have a big problem with authority. I always have. Not necessarily all authority. Some of it's justified. Some of it makes sense. But I'm talking about authority that I disagree with or question, or it's not completely obvious to me why it exists. It seems almost like a bureaucratic authority. I don't feel that governs me. Which is wrong, because it does, and I will go to jail, but I have no respect for it, which is difficult, and I've got to fight down the tendencies to let that get carried away to the point where I can't have a job or I wind up in jail because I disagree with the current laws.
Because you're driving down the street smoking a blunt with an M16 on a tank.
Exactly. I mean, the government doesn't like that, but,
Give me an example of what you mean without revealing too much of what you do for a job, I guess.
Well, if we're talking about specifically career driven, I mean, naturally, you all know I have a major issue with bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake.
Yeah.
That absolutely drives me crazy, and I happen to work in a place that is heavily endowed in bureaucracy.
Any place, in any place that gets big enough, that's what happens. They create all these little positions So you have overseer of the supervisor of the assistant director,
Exactly.
secretarial, administrative assistant.
Yeah, me and you actually were having a conversation when I made up a title. I remember it was like a 14-word title, and I sent it to him, and it legitimately sounded like a title.
Yeah.
Like, it sounded like one that you would actually hear. Yeah, and it was like assistant to the director of communications of some, and I mean, it just went on and on. It was a paragraph and a half.
And you could tell it'd be like a 6-figure salary.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
That guy made a ton of money and didn't have a real job.
Yeah.
So
He was that guy
yeah.
that just supervised a couple other people.
yeah, and that's how it gets when you get to a certain extent. There's, your line staff that actually produces work, and that's my big thing is there production. Do you have a report at the end of the day? Did you angle pipe in the power plant to run electricity? Did you pull out and extract this much oil from the ground?
Like
Do you
boots
have
on the ground.
product? Right.
Yeah.
That's the worker. That's the line staff worker. That's the blue collar person, and I appreciate that person because they
Same.
actually have a real job.
Yeah, they're doing
Same.
something with their hands.
And then there's a person at the top who started this company, who structured this from ground up, and they're the business, they're the analyst, they're the entrepreneur that started this. I have respect for that person too. That's the white collar person. But all of those people in between, it's very difficult for me to have a real conversation or even respect their title. Because in my opinion, the only thing that they do for a living is tell the boss what the line staff did for the day. Literally.
Yeah.
That is what they're doing, is they're a messenger. What is your product at the end of the day? Their product would be, I made a report of what everybody did today. And I'm like, so your job is to report my work to the real boss that's actually in charge. That's your job. So you're not even supervising me because you don't. Every question that I have when I ask you, you just run and ask him and then bring the answer back to me.
And I think at that point, people should at least have some kind of, if anything, some wisdom to impart to their staff at the very least, because the whole idea is you pay your dues, right? You pay your dues, boots on the ground for so many years, and then you get promoted to a job like that. But what I find is exactly correct. Even if you have people that have put in their dues, by the time they get up to the station of submitting the report on what everybody else did, they don't even want to impart wisdom or try to help.
Well, well, the funny thing is when people work their way up, you have two things that happen, right? One is Peter Principle. People get promoted to their level of incompetency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have people who move up from line work to supervisory work because they're burned out from line work. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, this guy, he was a therapist for 20 years, and he's so burned out from doing therapy, he's moved up into management and supervising therapists. The problem is he's checked out from that too.
Yeah, and a lot of
Yeah.
these people, what kills me is, this is another really important aspect of that. And so at the end of the day, I guess you could say rebellism as a whole character issue that I have to pipe down. It's very difficult for me. It's something that challenges me daily.
Always like biting your tongue.
Right. So rebellism as a whole, but when you're talking about career specific, it's bureaucracy, because that is your authority.
So-
your work. But what I'm
Okay.
getting at is these supervisors that you're referring to that go from line staff to middle management. One of my issues with them that I see in my job, I've seen it in every job, is they are afraid to make a decision. Either A, they're not allowed to make a decision, or B, they're afraid to make a decision, and that's how they got to the position that they're at, is being a yes man.
Yeah.
You got
So
it.
Well-
they can't tell you, yeah, that's okay. It's, I'll run and check with my boss's 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 boss and get back with you.
Well, as a country, we're so litigious. People are terrified to make a decision because they don't want to be sued.
Right.
Even if they know what the answer is.
Oh, I'm not saying it's unfounded.
Yeah.
I'm just saying
It is what it is.
yeah, but my level of irritation with it, because it affects me, it affects all of us, I feel is warranted. 100%. And I don't know how to change it, but everyone should be irritated with it, because it slows progression to almost a grinding halt.
So here's the question, because what you're saying is very punk rock, or what used to be punk rock. punk rock used to be fight the man.
Yeah.
Now punk rock is just I am whatever the man says, and I'll play on Stephen Colbert show.
And I color my hair different colors of the rainbow.
Yeah, just
and
like
think it's okay.
so predictable.
Yeah.
And so
It's so mainstream.
it is
so hipster.
it is so sad
Yeah.
that punk has become mainstream.
Yeah.
Because it used to be so fight the man, and now it's just hey, whatever the man says, I'm on board.
Yep.
And we talked about that last week in the music episode. So looking at what the rebelliousness, unchecked, left unchecked, what would the cult like following be that you would gravitate towards if you
Good
didn't do
question.
anything about it?
Oh, for sure. Would be what not necessarily, because before I say my answer, I want to put out there that not every cult is based on religion.
No, there's also cults are just anything that has an extreme ideology with some degree of brainwashing.
Right.
Right.
So mine would probably be anti-government.
Like one of those
Like a militia.
yeah, I'm thinking like those autonomous zones in Oklahoma that like don't want to be completely left alone.
Exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't say what do they call those one people? The people that feel that none of the laws apply to them.
Anarchists.
No, it's not that. What do they call them? Sovereign citizens.
Sovereign.
But no, I wouldn't fall into that. I would be more of a because the sovereign citizens, any of them that I hear going on, they're arguing about silly shit that I'm like, well, you need a driver's license, sweetie. You need that.
It's too extreme.
Yeah,
But-
exactly.
But again,
it's the difference between so an anarchist is to sovereign citizen, as in my opinion, a libertarian would be the autonomous zone that you're referring to where, hey, we've purchased this land, we pay tax money for it, but this 15 square mile radius, we have walls, and you're not coming in here regardless. And if you try
Basically-
to, we're going to fight you.
basically like that M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village.
Yeah, exactly like that, except we've got dogs and perimeter guards. And if we see the government coming, then I guess we're all going to die today.
Not a guy in a scary costume
Exactly.
that scares kids from leaving.
So
The
yeah,
problem with that
would be
is and I shall bring up this topic of Jonestown because the problem with that is that the guns started pointing from outside to inside. Mm-hmm. And that's the issue
Wasn't
that
it the same
arises.
with Ruby Ridge? I mean,
In Waco.
Yeah, I mean every single
That's
time.
what happens is the government starts to crack. Well, and I'm surprised it didn't happen with those autonomous zones in like Seattle, and it probably will.
That's,
And I
that's
mean,
the thing,
that's-
right? The guns are gonna flip around, and it was like you need to
Because
sit
ulti-
down
well,
and
but-
mind.
Because and that's doesn't necessarily contradict anything we're saying because we're talking about
Oh, no,
cult-like
it
mentality.
just
And
made
the
me
problem
think of
is
that,
government is always going to crack down on those. Even the most free-based states
Yeah,
are going to crack down on that kind of stuff.
And that's one of the things that irritate me about this whole situation, because you could create a compound and not be violating a single
Any
law.
laws, nope.
But the fact that you have walls and guns make them nervous, and they want to get inside and see what you're doing. You haven't even broke a law, but they will get inside there, even if it means burning everyone inside alive. And
Yeah.
they don't even know if you broke a law, but they'll try to find some reason to get in there. And that bothers me, because it's like, I bought this land. This is my land. I pay taxes.
So,
that should be the end of the game.
Are you meaning like if you started your own cult, like you would be offended? Like if you had people, I think people make the difference. If it's just you with your guns, maybe not. But are you in this scenario? Are you thinking of like other people joining you in this?
Yeah, once
thing?
Biggie had like 20 people living at his compound with him, then the government would take notice and the FBI would be investigating.
They don't care if it's just me. I mean, I don't think you'd really have to call some attention to yourself.
Yeah.
But the attention that would the biggest attention, the biggest red flag is, oh, not only does he have guns, dogs, razor wire, and walls, but now he's got 20 people.
Yeah,
He's creating a
that's-
stronghold. He's
Yeah.
creating an army. He's going to make these people into terrorists.
and do you
of
think
course,
that-
the government is going to label you as a terrorist as quickly as they
Whether
can.
you
because-
terrorized anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't even have
So,
to do that. It's
and-
just a quick label to where now I can do anything I want to you and not face any repercussions. And multiple times the ATF has screwed up and burned children and killed people and
Absolutely.
slaughtered people. And what were the repercussions at the end of the day?
And that was
Even
gonna
though
be
the
my
report
question.
found them as the violators in every
Yeah.
way, shape, and form.
My question back to you is, do you think that they actually give a shit about the people in there, or are they just worried about the threat to them?
That's exactly they
Yeah.
consider it a threat, even if it's an existential threat that hasn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
Just the fact that it could eventually, maybe in some way, become a threat. Now we're going to go at it hardcore, and I don't like that because that's that rabbit hole chasing. That's broken Windows theory. Except instead of utilizing it to fix a town, you're utilizing it to be, in essence, the thought police, the
Well,
1984.
That is the Vanilla Sky. We're going to arrest you before you do the crime.
Minority Report.
Minority Report.
Oh, Minority. What's
Yeah.
Vanilla Sky?
Tom Cruise.
That
also.
was a whacked out weird movie. I
But
don't
Cameron
even
Diaz
remember.
and Tom Cruise, but you
I'm
got the
thinking
Tom
Minority.
Cruise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Minority Report in essence. 1984 Thought Police. That's how we're going to fix it. Is if you step out of line and spit bubble gum on the sidewalk, well, you could, if you did all of these right steps, end up being a terrorist. So we're going to go ahead and go after you like we would go after a terrorist because you spit bubble gum on the sidewalk.
So is
That's
a
my
part of
issue.
you for a cult-like environment, or you think that people should be free to do that kind of thing?
Well, if
To-
you're
to
not
build a
if you're not
compound and-
hurting
Or a
anybody,
commune?
Yeah, if you're not
Okay.
hurting anybody. And the thing is, if you want to build a compound and you want to have 6 wives and you've already bought that territory and that's your little area, I have no issue with that. You know, I
Okay.
mean, if you want to, as long as you're not hurting people,
Yeah.
if you have a difference of opinion from the government and you've already bought that land, as long as you're paying your taxes and no one's getting hurt,
yeah,
I don't have an issue with it.
Well, and that's what went wrong with that. Is it Chaz, the autonomous zone in Seattle?
Yeah,
Within like the
Capitol
second
Hill,
day,
yeah.
there was already like a couple murders.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's when, you know, and it's just like when things happen on these Native American reservations, they give them the option to take care of this and handle it. But when it gets to become a person, for example, if a tribe member kills another tribe member, then the Native police are allowed to handle it.
Which are
But
tied probably
if a
to state
person-
police, aren't they?
Well, if a person
They're
from
solid.
outside of that reservation comes onto that reservation and gets murdered, now federal law
Yeah, I
steps
was
in.
gonna say, I think
now it's the
FBI
FBI.
could-
Yeah.
Yep.
There is a
They won't
very
let
good
the tribal
movie
handle it.
with Val Kilmer about that.
Yep.
It's always
I
back to Val Kilmer.
It's such a good
It
movie.
is a good
I
movie,
can't
yeah.
remember the name of it.
Broken Arrow.
No. But that was okay. So anyway, but
Well,
yeah,
but
check
yeah,
that movie out.
that's
he was
my
a
thing.
Fed, and he come into the Indian reservation.
Well, and the other problem with Chaz was it wasn't like they bought land. They
Right.
took downtown Seattle.
Oh yeah, well that
I
was
mean, I don't know how that didn't get stopped instantly.
right. Yeah.
Just because, I mean, that is something that would historically had guns pointed at them in seconds.
Yeah.
And
well, the problem is the power demon takes these people over.
Well, I
because
agree.
once they're rejecting this overarching power of the U.S. government, then somebody steps up.
humans are hardwired for something greater than them. So if it's not God or gods, it may be government, it may be the self.
Yeah.
And so what happens, or maybe a person, you know, like Jim Jones, you know, people are hardwired for something greater than themselves. So what you see is if you leave that hole in yourself, you're going to gravitate towards something to fill that hole, right? Thomas Aquinas said there's a heart-shaped, God-shaped hole in every man's soul.
Yeah.
And now he was talking about religion, but that same part of the brain is activated, whether it's politics or religion,
Sure.
in the temporal lobes. So it's all kind of hit what he called the heart-shaped hole. kind of
it's governance
Well,
of
what you-
yourself, be it law or be it morals.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like what you're talking about is like a sense of duty or something. I'm thinking about a power demon.
Well, I'm talking about
and they
power.
often come in the form of people who portray themselves exactly the way you were talking.
Well, I've got to weigh in on this because I think that the thing that you saw with Chaz is a version of what happens with the police every day, but an unchecked version. In other words,
What do you mean?
when we have Chaz take off, somebody got their first little power trip in.
Mm-hmm.
They got to be the one with the armband and the billy club, and they like that. Just like our police do, and we see police get in trouble all the time for this, for having these power trips and going off reservation.
Because there's a certain, it's like with politicians, right? There is a certain personality that is driven to a position of power. You don't see a whole lot of chilled, laid back people want to go into politics.
A person with humility. I haven't seen somebody who
Maybe
has,
like Rand Paul. Yeah, there's not very many.
Yeah, and I mean that is an issue because it seems like all of the best leaders that we could have don't want that.
They don't want to be the leader. That's
Yeah.
kind of what makes them so awesome to people like us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same thing that has happened with the police historically was happening in Chaz, but no one was there to stop it. For police, we have things like internal affairs and different departments. A bigger department now, the state
That'll
police
check
is
'em.
going to look into that local.
Yeah, there's
local,
nothing like bureaucracy investigating itself, right?
now that's
a
an
great
issue.
That's a great way for corruption.
Yeah. But if you've got something, to an extent, you're always going to have, the state police are now looking at these deputies. Well, still, they're all cops at the end of the day.
Well, it's like,
But you
it's-
can't, at the same time, you can't have civilians looking at these deputies
Yeah.
because they don't know what the hell's going on.
well,
So,
it's like governments, like, it's come to our attention that we're doing something unconstitutional, so we're going to have our FBI investigate ourselves.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'll
We're
go
going to
well.
have the agency that we're in control of investigate us for wrongdoing real quick.
And the narrative is always going to be whatever supports the person with the most
party
power.
that's in charge.
Yeah.
Because they appoint the leaders of the CIA and FBI.
Yeah.
So those people are always just going to be lackeys for the party that's in charge.
Yeah. It's not
no-
a check and balance system at that point at all.
objectivity is an illusion.
No, well, it's kind of funny because when America was first founded, the vice president was the running opponent. So, like, say in this last election, we still operated on the way our country was founded. Trump would actually be the vice president. Biden would be the president. Trump would be the vice president. And last time it would have been Hillary would have been the vice.
That's
And
that's
an
true.
interesting
That's an
dynamic.
interesting
Yeah.
dynamic, but that's the way it was. Like when Adams won, Jefferson, who was his opponent, was the vice.
That
Or am I backwards? No, I think Jefferson was the vice then.
I'm not sure, but I can't see any major issues. That sounds like nothing but a good thing.
I guess
Why was that changed?
It could lead to someone floating down the river without a head.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes that's necessary because
This is moving towards the extreme, right, Biggie?
no. I'm saying, but no, the metaphorical sense of that. It seems like
I think
that
it's
could
a
be
good
necessary.
check and balance.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah, not physical.
Because
floating down the river, but-
when there's, I think it's a great check and balance because honestly, when you have one party that controls, like, was it the Senate or Congress, the vice president is they make the determining factor, right? So I think it's actually good for that to be in opposition to the president.
Yeah, because like for example, right now we have everything loaded with one party,
Which
All-
is never
all of-
good for any country on any political party.
Exactly. Yeah, if it was all red, I would be worried.
Yeah, no,
It's
you never
regardless of what
you
side.
never want all one party to control everything.
Well, my thinking, and this is getting completely off of our topic of cults, is that, the red and the blue party are essentially the same anyway.
You know, I've been saying
Well-
that for a long time.
Like, I think, like, this whole, like, not putting out the stimulus checks before the election. I think they both get into a little room and they decide what they're going to do and how they're going to do it to promote, you know, that this conflict, this division works for them, for each party. It makes them tons of money and it works for them.
Yeah, I would say they want different things. The problem is as you get towards extremes, right? The further you get towards the extremes, the more similar those extremes become.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
right.
it's like I always say with the political spectrum, it is not a line with left and right. It's actually a circle.
that was a great point. I remember when you pointed that out to me. I
It's
was
not
like,
a
that's
line with left and right like a magnet puller. You know, it's actually a circle, and on the at the bottom of the circle you have the extreme right and the extreme left, and they're actually almost identical. Like fascism and communism, they're almost identical. And when you look at history, especially with like Europe and stuff, those parties, it almost doesn't matter what they call themselves,
Right.
because they operate identically.
Yeah, so on one side of the circle, be it top or bottom, you've got a democratic republic. And then on the opposite end of that circle,
Be
to the left,
anarchists.
you would have communism, and
yeah,
to the
yeah.
far right, you would have fascism. But when you follow those, they both end up at the top or the bottom of
And
the
then,
circle.
and then
are just-
anarchists are on the exact opposite end.
Yes.
And those two
Yeah.
extremes, whether they're left or right, both are hateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Equally.
That's extremism in
just
general.
hate.
Yeah.
Well, it's because
So-
it's like we're going to talk more about that. You know, on a psychological level, they are the same person. It's hilarious that they don't get along, and maybe because they don't get along because they're the same person, and there is a degree of unhealthy cognitive thought patterns with those extremes, and maybe what it is, they don't like themselves, and so they don't like seeing something that mirrors.
They know, and this goes back to morality, right? They know on some level that what they're doing is wrong. Because I think most people know.
Oh, I was
What they're
so
doing.
disheartened to hear these people the other day advocating the violence that's been going on in our country. And they'll give you a list of all their justifications of why the violence is necessary. And then they will demonize the other side.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, don't you understand the other side talks just like you?
Yeah.
If I put you two together in the same outfit, I wouldn't be able to tell you two apart.
Yeah.
And they don't see that. You know, they don't see it at all. There is a huge cognitive deficit there that is preventing them from seeing any kind of logic or reason.
Yep.
So in essence, like I said, my overarching character issue that I would say is cultist would be or cult like would be
Totally shunning government.
yeah, just rebelling authority in general. Rebelling authority, and the thing is that's difficult is, like, for example, when I was young, I didn't rebel against my dad because he would always sit down and explain it to me, and everything that he made me do made sense. Like, it all lined up. I'm referring to rebelling against authority that I don't feel is morally, it doesn't have enough factors in it to justify its authority in the first place.
So how could
And then
that
at
lead?
a career level, like I said, was bureaucracy. But I think I wrote down here what I think that this could lead to potentially that would be negative.
Yeah. That's going to be my question.
Yeah. If I was to become an extremist in any way, the thing that I would worry about is that I surpass through libertarian and end up being that weird-ass sovereign citizen or that anarchist.
What kind of-
Now, I can never... The thing is, I see a reason for structure, so I'll never become that. But if I was to go to my extreme, if I was to go to my version of communism or fascism, it would be anarchist.
So
You
that
just got to hold it before you get there.
that is the reason we're talking about this, and God knows maybe it could help someone listening, right? The way you keep yourself from getting there is by being aware of where you fall. Because we all fall somewhere.
that's why this is such an important cast.
And so we gotta analyze, where do we fall? Because if we're not aware, we'll just go deeper down the rabbit hole.
Which is leading to what me and you were talking about that we were going to get around to, which is the modern Karens and Sharon
Modern
crisis.
Karens and Sharons.
Yeah, because it's actually a crisis. You want to get back to that after you guys answer your...
Yeah, we'll talk
let's
about
circle
Karens
back,
and Sharons.
because that's really good.
That's a deep one, yeah.
Really, really good.
All right, so who's next?
You're looking at me.
I think
kid.
Nana. We have a trend. I'm always last, right?
So, I've been like, oh, we're gonna do a. Okay, so I'm gonna go deep because that's how Nana rolls.
Yeah,
all
well,
right.
so we need to go deep, or it's not going to be interesting.
Well, I have been so fascinated by cults since like as long as I can remember, primarily for the reason like I cannot comprehend how people can give their lives completely over to a thing or a person, you know. And you know, one of the things that I think that cults have, and you know, all the different cults have in common is there is a basis of instilling in each person's mind, whether it's delivered over time, subtly, or even overtly, that who they are is not good enough.
Okay.
You know, that kind of wears them down over time.
I would say you almost have to break someone down a little bit in order to brainwash them.
Yeah. And they of course they're attracted to people who already don't have a sense of who they are, that sense of self that you were referring to,
Yep.
that awareness of their own tendencies.
And that's the psychology behind it, why the extremes are so similar, right?
Yeah. And
there's something in themselves they may be missing that is making them gravitate towards that control.
See, and I think that the reason that I could never wind up in that situation is like I said, I'm a little bit narcissistic, so I'm probably going to think that I'm better than that cult leader.
You'll be the one at the helm.
Exactly.
You're like, I should be the cult leader.
Be a little bit of discipline from the military. That never hurts. You know, the narcissism of I feel like I understand who I am better than anyone else can understand me, which is ridiculous because it's easier for somebody to look outside the box.
Objectively, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, in my mind, I'm like, well, that person could never understand me better.
Of course,
than
now
me.
you also have the podcast and you have us. We'll call you out on all your shit.
Yeah, which we've been doing.
Which we do a pretty good job of calling each other
Fix
out.
Biggie. That was one of them.
Fix
So
Biggie.
it's fascinating to me how that the process of how people are mentally broken down, and one of the themes again, and you see it in Scientology, you see it in all these things. The newest one is this Nexium cult. I don't know if anybody's been
People with heartburn, right?
people.
Oh,
I don't even know if I'm pronounced anyway.
Nexus?
It's a sex cult. So basically, this.
do you know where they meet?
Well, the guy who started the thing, you know, they all also have kind of this ideology that is very attractive. It seems really good. And like Scientology, they have their own kind of curriculum type of deal. And then the Nexium is like that too. That's one of the ones that has its own curriculum of just being a better person. How do you let go of these blocks that people have, you know, their fears, their insecurities.
That is a common trend you see in a lot of these cults. It falls under the guise of self-improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what you're missing in life. Mm-hmm. Because that's how you can manipulate people, right?
Absolutely. And
what are you missing that I can fill that void?
Yeah, or that basically the end result of that is the narrative points to, okay, if this situation is not working out for you, you've done something to cause it. Mm-hmm. And that is constantly like pushed in their heads, like it's you. So then over time it becomes any question, any objection to what they say becomes, well, why are you asking this question? What is within you that makes you doubt us or etc. And that to me is very fascinating because I think that I can relate to somebody who is always like thinking, I need to be better. I'm not good enough. And in some ways I think everybody should think that.
Yeah, because if you're not growing, what are you?
Right. So, but what the cults do is they take it to the extreme.
Of course, yeah.
And then you have people that really will do anything to be better. And they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're aligned with a good person or a good organization.
That's one of the problems that we're seeing is with the brainwashing. Mm-hmm. These people, like, there is they think they have the absolute moral high ground. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nothing you can say that will change their mind. And it's kind of terrifying. Mm-hmm. And especially since we're starting to see that on a large scale. This isn't like Jonestown with which was still pretty damn big. Was that 700 people?
It was like almost 1,000 people just dead.
And we're seeing millions actually.
Mm-hmm. It's just really wild because when I hear about something like that, I think, how do you find that? Okay, think about this. I'm one guy trying to get a girlfriend and I'm having a bad run at it. I'm not having any luck. Can you imagine finding 700 girlfriends? Because that's what he did. He found 700 people that were devoted enough to give their life to him.
Do you talk about Jonestown?
Yeah. Are you saying, do you see the parallel of what I'm saying there?
Well, the Nexium guy, he literally had a sex cult where the girls would brand right close to their vajayjays, brand his name. And he forbade them to get over like 95 pounds or something.
Well,
it was crazy.
And when I think of Jonestown, by the time they drank the Kool-Aid, literally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where that phrase comes from. By the time they drank the Kool-Aid, it's like Nana was saying, the guns are pointed at them. Mm-hmm. They had the FBI, they had CIA, they had military and paramilitary surrounding their encampment, and so by the time they actually drank the Kool-Aid, they thought they were going to die anyway.
Well, yeah, because that's what he told them. They weren't there, but he told them that they were there. Actually, what happened was
they were monitoring them.
They were monitoring, but a senator who had what had happened was. A lot of the families, members of the families who are like, fuck this, I'm getting out of here. Well, they had to leave their children, their little kids, their wives, their husbands, and escape. And then, so they appealed to one of the senators, I can't remember his name, in Washington. And he listened and he had a lot of compassion for him. And he actually went over there. And just to look around, he took a camera crew. You can find all this stuff on YouTube. And so that set off Jim Jones. Because Jim Jones was already getting ridiculously high every day on mescaline. He was just like a fucking nut.
Well, and that's what happens a lot. Hitler was too.
Yeah.
And probably Stalin. These people start getting... Didn't they find traces of meth or something with Hitler?
I think he did do amphetamines.
He went to
or his doctor had prescribed him meth.
He went to a meeting with Mussolini, and Mussolini was about to back out. But when Hitler showed up, he had been shot up with so much cocaine that he just went crazy and was acting like a madman throughout the whole thing. And Mussolini backed down and just cowardly bitched out because he was like, this guy is probably going to have me murdered here at the convention. Because he was so erratic at that moment, being so high.
Well, and he probably would have done it.
Yeah.
Eventually, anyway. That's the problem is those people eat their own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because if you are extreme in every fiber of your being, when something contradicts that or challenges that, you instantly get demonized and made the enemy. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. So, after the visitation of the commune, the senator leaves and he only has like 4 or 5 people with him. They go get on like one of those little commuter planes. Well, in the meantime, Jim Jones has his people, like he orders them to go kill him. And they do. They kill this senator and the people that he was with. And he knew he was done. He knew there was no way he could get away with murdering a damn senator or congressman, whoever he was. And so all along he was doing these drills like every night. We're going to drink the poison. And then he said, no, we're not going to do that, and send him back to bed. So they were already getting
because that's what
used to this.
To do the brainwashing, it has to be daily. Mm-hmm. It has to. You're almost moving that into the cerebellum, where it's like muscle memory, right? All these. The Marine Corps does that.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it.
And you could argue that the Marine Corps does some amount of brainwashing.
Oh, we all know it. I mean, it's like there's no hiding it. There's no fluffing that or there's no sugarcoating that. That's exactly what it is. It's necessary though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you want.
If you're willing to go kill.
If you want to break,
be killed.
you break someone down, and then rebuild them up in your image.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny to call the Marine a cult.
Mm-hmm. It's very cultish. You've talked to quite a few of us. You can tell there's very similar parallels.
Yeah, Marines have kind of the same personality.
It's a special breed, that's for sure.
Because the Navy doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's the only.
Everyone in the Navy just kind of does what they want to do.
That's why I feel like the Marine Corps is very. I equate us to not the 6-packs or anything. I'm not referring to that, but I'm talking about the mentality of like Spartans.
They are.
Yeah, I mean it's very much a parallel because there is no. I'm a tank driver. I'm a pipe fitter. I got
an M16. I'm going.
Yeah, I'm a warrior.
Yeah, no.
The second thing is something I do in my spare time.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The Marine Corps, of all the branches of service, they are the most like warrior caste. Society, and because the Spartans did brainwashing too. Come back on your shield or don't come back.
The 300, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you spent how long? How many weeks in the
And the thing is, they start as children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's
Can
every
you imagine
day.
how effective of a warrior that would be? Because can you imagine going through the Marine Corps from the time you're like 8?
Zero fear of death.
Well, how many did those 300
that's what the Hitler Youth
defeat? Was it like
The Persians?
10,000?
Yeah, it was something crazy
I mean,
that.
that's
before
effective.
they got.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're basically, each one of them was killing like 3 to 4 people a person.
Yeah.
That's unheard of in one battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was all the phalanx. Like, it was just good maneuvering.
Oh, it's just pure shield wall.
Yeah, that
tactic.
And the fact that...
Through the
Yeah,
shield.
they were...
Yeah.
They were very good at what they did.
Block thrust.
Yeah, and they practiced this every single day.
From the time they were kids.
They had the strategy advantage, the physical advantage. They had every single advantage. So I mean that is literally putting a bunch of special ops guys against farmers.
Well, and that's what the Hitler Youth was. They started as children.
That would have been something that would have, if it would have lasted longer, that would have been a terrifying group to go up against.
Yeah, because what happened is all those Hitler Youth kids, the brainwashing was just incomplete because after about 5 years, the power was gone, the Nazi Party was removed, and the kids just went back to their day to day.
But if it would have survived for 20 or 30 years,
like in Russia.
That would have been a terrifying group. Yeah, that would have been the Spetsnaz.
The Spetsnaz, yeah.
I've never heard of that. I'll have to Google that.
It's the Russian special ops. They're bad people.
Well, the thing about... the other thing that fascinates me is that people forget a lot of history. Like and we were talking about this earlier when we were texting each other, but they forget aspects of history. And one of the things that they never focus on, you always hear them, specifically to Jonestown, they focus on them drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, they've made dozens of jokes or thousands of jokes probably by now. And this event of these people dying, which was horrific. But they never go back and they never really look at how it all began. And the thing is Jim Jones was selling people on his socialist philosophies. And he had a bunch of his congregation was hugely diverse. Racially.
And that is what you may see with the extremes in the two-party system, is they may splinter off again, and some of those extreme MAGA people and those extreme Bernie kids, they may go, because Bernie was actually a socialist party, American Socialist Party. He wasn't a Democrat at all. And I don't quite know what is the extreme side on the right? They didn't really have a political party, did they?
Well, back in the day, just a few before Trump, there was the
Tea Party?
Tea Party.
Tea Party, thank you. Yeah, Tea Party would have been.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Tea Party were the ultra conservatives, and the American Socialist Party were the ultra left. And there may be those extremes may break off again. They got kind of unified right now in the last few years for votes, probably. They started catering to these people more for votes. So it brought in those extreme sides, which were actually not a part of the parties.
Yeah, see, I would argue that's orchestrated, though.
Oh, I think it's completely orchestrated.
Yeah. That's why you've got your CNN, you've got your venues that...
And that's what we're talking about. To solidify the brainwashing, you have to say the same thing. It's like muscle memory, right? In the cerebellum. You have to, in the hippocampus with your memory, like when you talk to these people on either extreme, either political side, doesn't matter. You can almost predict with a 99% accuracy what their talking point is going to be. That's how you know you have someone who's a free thinker versus someone who is brainwashed.
Yeah, we were talking about this.
Yeah,
because
if you're talking to a free thinker who does a lot of critical thinking, you might think you know what they say, and then their response will go, "Oh, interesting. I never would have guessed that." Then you know they're actually a critical thinker.
Yeah. What you weren't privy to this. Me and him were talking on the phone a couple of days ago, and I said, when I meet someone that I can tell doesn't have any free thought, they're just regurgitating what their narrative, what their party's narrative, what their political opinion is, or their just sociological opinion in general.
Or religious.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm already, once I figured out that this person falls within that category, there's no need to speak to them any further, period. And I literally write them off as that type of person. And unless work makes me talk to them, I have no reason to ever speak to them again, because I already know all of their opinions about everything.
Yeah.
Well, you may never have anything to learn from them.
No.
Exactly. I can't learn anything from them, and they'll never learn anything from
they
me.
will, because...
And everything should be about learning at the end of the day.
Because everything that
too.
you say to them will be met with 100% resistance, and they will deny anything you say that goes against their schema and their worldview.
And if it aligns with theirs, then it's just going to be yes man back and forth. So what are we doing here?
It's just an echo chamber.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I like certain people so much, is because it's like a light bulb will go off in my head, even if I'm wrong and I feel embarrassed that I was wrong about something, and that other person shows me something else. I'm like, well, shit, that's really awesome. Even if I was wrong and I got embarrassed, I learned something.
I remember I had a professor. We were talking, and I said, yeah, I've been kind of going. I like play back and forth in my head. He's like, oh, well, if it's in your head, then you're always right. I'm like, you don't know my head at all then. I'm arguing with myself constantly.
That is something very important, and this isn't getting onto the...
I will call myself out on my own thoughts all day long.
That's critical thinking.
It is.
This isn't getting into the Sharons and Karens, but the person that I was having this conversation with the other day that falls into that category... I told them that it's very important, because they haven't been doing this, if you have an opinion and you're starting to, and if you see, you've heard this opinion, you agree with this opinion, and you think going forward that this is now your opinion, the first thing you need to do is to look up everything that contradicts that opinion. You want to challenge that opinion 100% before you pursue it any further. Because if you just go with it, then it's the, what is it? The confirmation bias.
Yeah.
So that's what I was telling this person is, she found this specific thing that she said, well, that opinion sounds legit to me. Now I'm going to research why that opinion's right. And I said, you're doing the exact opposite thing of what you need to do. You need to search and find why that opinion's wrong, because you may find something that immediately checks it off the list. Now, if you search for why that opinion's wrong, research the hell out of it. And if you can't find anything, then you can go ahead and start looking into why that opinion is something that you want to have as a collective thought and keep for yourself.
And it's funny that we're talking about this because the dad philosophy I'm going to put out on Wednesday is about challenging yourself and being aware of your biases. And because it's the scientific method, a good scientist tries to prove themselves wrong.
Yep. And that's actually one of the examples that I used was the scientific method. Yes.
And you don't want to go into research trying to prove yourself right, because you're going to have so many confounds that are going to be glaring.
And it's just to be self-serving. That's the only reason why people do it.
Oh, and there's so many bad
that I can
scientists out
think of.
there.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it with some of the COVID stuff. They have a narrative that they want to push, so their science is gravitating towards their narrative, not towards research.
Yeah.
And that's scary, because now you're putting out faulty scientific study. So
And the problem with that is if it was your dad sitting on the couch, no one would give a shit. But these are people in positions of power.
leading the country.
Yeah,
in the
people that have a
people
lot of
in the
influence.
CDC, people in the World Health Organization, people who are influencing hundreds of millions of people
Yeah.
through faulty research. And so you have to, just because you have a belief doesn't mean it's wrong, but you have to challenge it.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, you may find the more you challenge it that you have a lot of objective, because truth is objective, right?
Yeah.
Perception is subjective, but truth is objective. It's kind of like
It should be.
it is. Whether we see it objectively or not, that's a whole different matter.
Yeah.
Like 3 people can see a car accident and have 3 different explanations of what happened, but the truth is still somewhere there
Yeah.
of what happened and why that person died in that car accident,
Yeah.
right?
And all 3 might be wrong.
All 3 might be wrong.
Yeah.
But the truth is objective, but their perception is subjective. So when you're looking at what we're talking about, you have to completely be willing to be wrong. You have to. That's kind of like what, because my dad philosophy is going to be on vulnerability as a strength, because there's a certain degree of vulnerability to allow yourself to be wrong, right?
Well, yeah, it's it has a lot to do with really, self-efficacy. I think.
It's all about honesty with yourself.
Yeah, and right, to say, even if I'm wrong about something, that does not diminish me as a person.
What is the worst thing that can happen if I'm wrong? And
Somebody will laugh at you, Stan.
Well, not necessarily, because here's the thing. If you go down the rabbit hole of extreme ideology too far, you can do some really evil shit.
Yeah.
And so then you have cognitive dissonance saying, well, I just was a prisoner guard at this gulag and I executed 12 people yesterday. Well, you did do something really wrong, didn't you? And so cognitive dissonance is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
And do you guys know what cognitive dissonance is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, should we explain it for anyone
You
listening?
can explain it.
So cognitive dissonance is when new information contradicts old information and creates a sense of like anxiety or tension within ourselves, because we don't want to hear it because it's going against a belief we have. So it will, if the more extreme your behavior, to justify that extreme behavior, your brain is going to rationalize to protect itself. And you see that with Nazis and with communists and with all these people who do really terrible things to human beings. And, those slave owners in the South back in the 19th century, they justify these, and it almost always starts with dehumanizing.
Yeah.
Because you have, that's what scares me so much about the extremes, what's going on right now in our country. Because you have to dehumanize someone to justify icky things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, oh, well, they're just a bunch of white supremacists. So you think 75 million people are white supremacists? Really? But see, if you think someone's an evil white supremacist, then you can justify clubbing them.
Yeah. And I mean, you can flip that.
Oh, easy.
You know, you could say, oh, well, all of these people are,
Evil commies.
yeah, and pandering soy boys, weak charactered people. I
Yeah.
mean, so, and there's a lot of them that aren't.
And if you
so,
and you can say they're a bunch of immoral, self-serving commie bastards. And so again, you are dehumanizing them. And so when shit hits the fan, you can justify violent behavior, and that is terrifying to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
should be.
And then you also, I'll flip that more to my point about cults. You get somebody to essentially, I don't know, maybe it is in the same vein as dehumanizing themselves, kind of. You convince them that something's wrong with themselves.
Well, exactly. The difference is instead of dehumanizing the other, you're dehumanizing the self
Yeah.
and allowing. It's kind of like the Marine Corps, right? Even though they're not really, well, they are dehumanizing a little bit, right? You're breaking down their sense of self to rebuild them up in the Marine Corps' vision.
Oh yeah, when you actually, that's a big tenet of being in.
Yeah, it's literally the root of it.
Yeah, when you go to the recruit depot, like that is one of the things is there is no I, there is no me, because you're not a person at that point.
Which is actually why
it's A, you're a collective, but B, you're also not a person or a Marine. Right now, you're below any of that.
I would almost argue that that's kind of justifiable given the purpose.
Oh,
it
yeah,
is.
for sure. It's necessary.
Yeah.
but it can be scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so thank God, the Marine Corps, every Marine I've ever met.
That's one thing about the
They
Marine
put-
Corps that I love is that I have a feeling if there was any branch that is going to go with their morals and with the Constitution versus whatever
that's exactly
political
what I was
party's in
going to
charge,
say.
it
They're
would
going
be
to put the
Marine Corps.
Constitution over the commander in chief.
Yes, they don't give a shit about that. That's secondary compared to the Constitution.
And because
it wasn't just me, just because I would think, oh, it's just me because I'm a little rebel.
No, it's drilled into the Marine.
It's all of
Well,
them.
that actually makes me feel better.
no,
It should.
it
Yeah.
should.
They're the old guard.
They're the defenders of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And one of the things also because of it, it's funny because we're talking about extremes, right? And even though the Marine Corps does it, you don't meet too many Marines that are hideous humans. And one of the things I love about Marines, they make such great friends because they're so fucking loyal.
That is true.
They're so loyal.
Yeah.
And they don't. I don't have any Marine friends that use and manipulate you.
That's true.
they're-
My grandpa was a Marine. He was awesome. Now, my uncle was a Marine. He was an asshole.
Well, some of them are assholes.
A lot of them are assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're loyal.
Even with that asshole, yeah, it's a loyal asshole. Yeah, that's true.
They make some of the most loyal friends.
Not to
And-
say that they won't do savage, shitty shit. They will, but I'm not referring to lying, thieving. That's not common. If you see a Marine doing that, it's 1 in a million. But the savage, shitty shit that I'm talking about is something war related or something that's
it's combat related.
Yeah, something that it's like a pit bull. It's just crossed
and what-
wires,
and
but
what
it's never malicious to the ones that they love. They're always loyal to the
And
things
what
they
you
care
can
about.
see with Marines in particular, but Army also, and especially special ops, and people like the Rangers, MARSOC, SEALs, they have they can have a crisis of morals. If they take a life in combat, and it does go against their beliefs.
Yeah.
Even though it was justifiable in terms of war and self-defense, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not going to go to the brig for it, but you're going to have to deal with it.
But you deal with it on an emotional level. That's part of PTSD, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
I mean
my-
that's in essence that's a sentence in your head.
Well, my
you
papa,
may not be
he was
sentenced to
in,
the brig.
That's a really interesting way to put it because you are judging yourself in your own mind.
Well, I think that's what happened to my papa because he was in World War II. And I remember being little and he would tell inappropriate stories, but he would get drunk and tell inappropriate
Oh,
stories.
because it comes out when they're drinking, right?
Yeah.
And those World War II Marines, those are your those are your tip top Golden Boy Marines.
Yeah,
for sure.
Those are the
And they're the last ones that actually did amphibious assaults, island hopping.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what we're designed for.
Iwo Jima. Oh, they were Navy back then. Marine Corps was total Navy in World War II.
What do you mean? Oh, yeah. The Navy
Well-
gave us rides to the islands. We were
Yeah.
island hopping, doing our amphibious thing. Yeah.
Well,
And that was interesting because when Vietnam
Mm-hmm.
occurred, we weren't doing that anymore. We were
And the Navy
fighting
was
in the cities.
and the Navy was doing all the support for the Marine Corps. We bombed the hell out of everything before we sent Marines in.
Oh, yeah. Shelled the island until
mean-
there was nothing left.
Yeah.
But
His true nature was very
yeah, sorry, yeah.
sweet. He was like me, though. I think I'm the most like him. Because he was just because I knew him as a fat old man, just sweet and alcoholic, but the sweetest alcoholic you ever want to meet. And he was just a jolly fat guy with a lot of love, and I think that's what he struggled with, the
Yeah.
things that he had to do.
Out of survival.
Yeah, but also he was, of course, prideful that he had
yeah, and
went through that, and
it's funny because I've met...
there's honor in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If no other war had honor, that one did.
So
for sure.
So here's the question. Once you start getting to that extreme where your behavior is becoming extreme, not just your thought patterns, but your behavior, which then it creates that circle, right, of cognitive dissonance where you justify or you rationalize your behavior to meet your thoughts. How do you break that cycle?
Well, I'll bring this back to my tendency. We were talking about our tendency and the idea that
Hey, we didn't let you really finish what yours
no,
was.
but that's okay. We had a good discussion, but like the idea that I'm not good enough, that I'm always challenging myself mentally, and I think that's it leaves a blind spot for a manipulation tactic, and I'm just way more aware of it now than what I used to be.
You mean where
Somebody will come in and say, "Oh, well, let me exploit that you don't feel good
the,
enough."
the self-esteem issue?
Well, it's not necessarily self-esteem. It's something else. It's a drive that I want to be better. It's mixed with humility for sure, but it's a drive that it's like a perfectionist type of deal.
Well, and humans,
So it sounds like Scientology might be able to snatch you up if you're not careful.
well,
if she made
well,
enough
they
money-
might have back in the day.
They're not interested
Yeah,
in her.
I can't afford
Yeah,
that shit.
she can't afford that shit.
Yeah, no, I mean that could be a possibility, but I don't think that could happen now
I'd be
because
curious-
again, I'm aware of
I'd
that
be curious
blind
what your
spot.
theton level is.
yeah.
We gotta hook you up, man.
Yeah.
That's funny. They would hate me. They would hate me.
Too many questions.
Yeah, because you would question. It's like I couldn't be a Mormon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mormons, let's kind of look at that for a second too, right? Mm-hmm. Because when we talk about
That's written down here.
when we're talking about we've been talking about politics, right?
Uh-huh.
For an hour. When we start looking at religion, because when people think cult, they don't always think. Actually, I would say they probably very seldom think politics, right?
Yeah.
They almost always go straight to religion. And part of that's because we live in an anti-theist culture right now. I'd say half the country is anti-theist. Mm-hmm. And so it's very easy to say, oh, well, those guys are bad, right? It's kind of what we've been talking about. It's the theme for today's podcast. So, but when you look at religion, because religion starts at a very young age. And if you think back to our spiritual development, and you two had experiences that were actually very similar. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess your mom had similar experiences to Biggie's experiences.
So I had like a secondary experience.
Yeah. And whereas mine, like being like Northern Episcopalian, totally different, right? I had like a minister that was gay taking us to see As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson, to kind of probably indoctrinate us in a different way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And So we all had I had a very unique experience compared to you two, or like Biggie and your mom, and so I guess my question is, how does that, when you look at religion, what degree is it to where it becomes more cultish?
That's exactly what I had written down. What is the difference between a cult and a religion?
Because
I mean, there's a lot of actual papers, articles that are lengthy talking about this, but I'm wondering what your all's opinion is. What is the difference?
Personally, I don't see how, as someone who has known so many religious people, and I'm Buddhist, I'm very religious myself, I don't see cult-like behavior, but I have met people who do. Some of those like home church people are fucking weird, man. And so
would you say maliciousness is the difference?
I'm thinking maliciousness, but
I was going to say the dehumanization aspect.
like the Westboro Baptist Church, right?
Yeah. Whether they're dehumanizing each other or like you were talking about the other.
Themselves or others.
So you would put Westboro
and that
well
is extremely
into cult.
malicious.
They are I think they're very cult-like.
I think that they're probably more cult-like than most cults.
Group, because with cult mentality, groupthink is essential. You don't want critical thinking, right? That's
Absolutely.
the exact antithesis of what a cult wants. They want yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, and they drilled into your brain every single day until it's muscle memory and cognitive, restructuring, right?
Yep.
I will say this is just too funny because we were talking about the Marine Corps and then we talk about Westboro Baptist Church. Westboro Baptist Church went to a Marine's funeral who had
gay.
died in Afghanistan, and they went there and
So scummy.
brought up their little signs.
It's
and tried to pull their
malicious.
shit.
It's no respect for the fact that is a human being, and that people love that person.
See, and that's the difference between
But
an Episcopalian might say, I don't believe at that behavior, but that's God who will judge that, not me. Because even Jesus says, he's without sin cast the first stone, right?
Yeah.
And so, but they're willing to play judge and jury, right? They're doing the divine judgment. That is, I think, where you start seeing that line change between cult and religion, right?
I completely agree. It's that I think we hit it when we brought up dehumanization. And then it translates into not just what they're saying, but what they're doing to other or them within their own.
Are they breaking you down? See, because just taking your kid to church every Sunday because you believe in your faith and you want your kids to believe what you believe, it's not really brainwashing, right? Not really. It depends on what, are you breaking them down as a human and restructuring them?
No, you're trying to give them what you have.
You're trying to give them a moral backbone.
Education. And every parent has the right to do it their way.
It doesn't mean you're right. It just means, but the malicious intent's not there.
And then when the child gets older, they can say, "Ma, screw that." That's their right.
Well, devil's advocate here.
Okay.
When you're saying they're trying to give them a tool to utilize to be a better person or to have a good moral compass, don't you think all the cults are saying that to themselves as well?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely.
That's what I'm getting at is I don't think we can use that specific thing as a defining feature as the difference between a cult and a religion. I think it has to go back to dehumanizing and it has to go back to dehumanizing and malicious intent.
No. What we're just saying is it's not necessarily brainwashing.
Yeah.
That
he was making a case that it wasn't.
That in itself,
okay.
Yeah.
That in itself is not criteria for brainwashing.
Gotcha. Okay.
You have to completely break down the person and infiltrate the way that they think.
Okay. I just...
taking them to church with you on Sunday and having them go to Sunday school and learn the 10 Commandments and stuff, that's kind of disingenuous to call that brainwashing.
And
okay, so here's another question that I've got. when you're referring to occult, malicious intention, etc., dehumanizing, and we're referring to the difference between cult and religion.
Yeah, the throat clearing starts.
Yeah, here we go.
At least I don't have my headphones on today.
All right, so we're saying that two things that cults do that are an issue is they dehumanize and they have malicious intent towards someone.
An extreme ideology.
Right. Now, we're saying that mainstream religion does not contain those, yet they historically have.
Some.
Two different occasions with the two of the top 5 religions on the planet, with the Christian Crusades and also with
But we've argued that the
Muslim.
But we've argued. I'm going to go with Bill Maher here. You know, the Christians haven't killed anyone in the name of religion in like 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But Islam continues to kill people daily.
I'm surprised he actually said that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sam, that was, you got to watch it. That was the one where Sam Harris and Bill Maher were arguing with Ben Affleck.
Oh, I did watch that. Yeah, that was interesting.
He was one of the first ones that came out publicly. Bill Maher's kind of brave. He was one of the first ones that come out.
He's willing to
about
allow
that.
himself to be booed by his own audience.
Yeah.
And they will.
Yeah.
Because a lot of his audience are brainwashed.
Yeah.
And he's a critical thinker.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And so...
some of his
he's very pretentious, but I can't help but to like him.
I watch his show because I love how he challenges himself.
What are those little end notes that he does at the very end? The little segment. Some of them have literally given me chills because he's been so fucking on point. You know, he's not always on point, but sometimes
it's like the end of a South Park episode. I get chills sometimes.
I mean, really,
South
I'm like,
Park nails it.
Yeah,
they nail it so often.
Yeah. When the spotlight hits one of the characters and they start talking on South Park, I'm like, this is gonna get
It's kind of like in the Peanuts Christmas special when Linus comes out and basically illustrates the real point of Christmas, and he cuts through all this shit, and it's the whole point of Christmas is not it's Christ Mass, right?
Yeah.
It's in the name. It's got nothing to do with buying shit.
Yeah,
and that was the consumerism that has taken over Christmas.
Absolutely.
Was what the whole... It is the only Christmas special like that. That's what makes it so unique. And Linus, literal spotlight on the stage where he explains the true meaning of Christmas and cuts through all the bullshit. And South Park kind of does that too.
Yeah, and well, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate again. I'm not. Well,
No, you need to.
But we think of Christmas now as in buying gifts for each other and Santa Claus and Coca-Cola and polar bears, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
But Christmas historically, at least within the past 500 or 1,000 years, has been based around, like you said, Christ Mass.
Well, partially because no one had money.
Right. But even prior to that, when you're talking about, the Saxons' influence on Christianity and when all of the Vikings came over and started to present Yuletide and how they utilized Christianity and literally altered certain things to fit into the Yuletide in order to kind of pull them over into Christianity.
You're talking about syncretism.
Right, putting the two religions together to where it would make conversion easier.
Yeah, you want to appeal to the people you're trying to convert.
Right, which is really smart. I mean, it was well organized.
Because Islam is just, I'm going to take your head. It's convert by the sword, right?
Yeah.
And that's one reason probably why it's the number one religion. It's not number one in the best. It's just,
not by choice.
Yeah,
right.
It's just looking at sheer volume of adherence.
Right.
Islam's the biggest religion in the world, and I think it's only makes sense based on their ideology: convert or die.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like most people, it's like, so do I lose my head or do I just say Allah and pray towards Mecca in the morning?
Right. And that's not a hit against every person of the Islam faith. There's a lot of people that choose to do that. Like here in America, there's a lot of people that, Because in America, if you were originally Islamic and came over to America, well, now you can go do whatever you want.
Yeah,
But
can wear
people
blue
still
jeans and
continue
vote.
with that. Right, yeah, but people still continue with that
drive a
because they
car.
like the culture, the tradition, the religious aspect
Well, and the
of
fun
it.
thing is
But
that
a
most
good chunk of the Middle East, like what you're saying, it's not optional.
no,
And that's where that
and
mass
that's the
influx
fun
comes from.
thing about most American Muslims. They actually it comes down to brainwashing, right? They can actually read the Quran, and they do read the Quran, whereas most people in the Middle East are only knowing what they're being taught. Whereas in
Are you talking about literacy?
yes, and so American Muslims, they focus more on the parts of the Quran that are peace loving
Right.
because they're actually just reading it. Whereas in a lot of places in the Middle East, they can't read.
You're saying they're
And
using
by-
it more of as a moral compass rather than social control.
And pre-Reformation in Christianity, all the services were held in Latin. The average person could not read the Bible.
Yeah.
And half of them didn't even understand what the hell was being taught in the services.
That's a good point.
And I think literacy is a huge factor in controlling people.
Yeah, wasn't
Yeah.
wasn't it Martin Luther that translated the Bible and made it available for people and really pushed the literacy rate?
Yeah, it was the Reformation.
Yeah.
He wanted services done in the language. He was German.
Yeah.
He wanted languages done or services done in the language of the people.
Yeah.
And it was instrumental into changing how Christianity operated.
So that would probably be a lot of what made it different. You know, you've got Islam now in the Middle East would be comparable to Christianity prior to
Then.
Reformation.
And that's what Bill Maher was saying.
Yeah.
But American Muslims aren't like that.
Mm-hmm.
A couple extremes, right? You know, there was the guy who was Army or Marine that was a Muslim who like fragged some of his people.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a couple here and there, but for the most part, American Muslims are peace loving people. They really are, and they've read the Quran, and there's parts of the Quran that have objective truth that talk about peace, and they live with that and they run with that. When I worked at the soup kitchen, there was a handful of Muslim ladies that worked there. Even though they had stuff that I kind of made me a little repulsed, like the women aren't allowed into the chapel area. And I'm so sorry, I don't know what the chapel area is called in a mosque, but I just don't. I don't know what the term is for that. In a Christian church, like is the little narthex before you get into the chapel. Well, so women would sit in there during the service. Only men were allowed in the service.
Yeah.
And I can't stand that kind of shit. But, you know, these were really sweet women worked at the soup kitchen with me. Great people. And
that just what you were saying before you continue, that leads you to a whole entire other thing, which is, you know, the Middle East, I'm sorry, Islam, these poor people that are being defended constantly by the left, the same left that looks at toxic masculinity and anything that's patriarchal as the
Yeah.
enemy.
I don't understand how the modern feminist movement got tied into Islam because it is so anti-woman. I can't even wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it might have came from trying to reduce the aggression towards Muslims after 9/11, and then it just kind of blew up in its own ideology.
If I had to take a guess, the Democratic Party has kind of made it its goal to take every minority that exists and unify them. And in America, Islam's a minority. Not in the world.
Yeah.
In the world, they're the number one.
Majority.
They're the majority in the
And
world.
that could be another fear, but about why they do that, because they don't want them after us, in a hard way.
But
like
what
if
they
they
don't
collectively got together.
Which is interesting because Islam absolutely hates the American left just as much.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think they're taught
They
to
hate
hate
the-
us in general.
They are.
Because we have a lot of things they don't have.
You don't appease evil, right?
Islam is repulsed by the number one people that want to pat them on the back, give them free ride, and protect them in every way, shape, and form.
Because
believe it.
they see them as just, and we're talking, and I do believe, though, just to be fair, I think that there are, like, we have different sects of
course,
Christianity.
definitely.
I'm for sure
Different
there's
levels
more
of extremism.
liberal types
Yes, because
of
there-
Muslims as well in different areas.
I think Biggie had said this a few years ago. Tell me if I'm wrong. I got my numbers all wrong here. About when you were over in the Middle East, it's like 25% of the people want to blow you up. 50% of the people are okay with the people who want to blow you up, and 25% of the people are glad you're there.
100%. Yeah.
Did I get my numbers right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very accurate
And so those,
description.
those 25%, those are the people that want, the women that want to wear blue jeans and drive a car and vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if people really paid attention to, I want to say it's Iran, but I do remember watching a documentary about how, in the 70s, the Muslim women, was more liberal at a time.
Oh, yeah. They were roller skating with mini skirts on and driving cars and everything. And then overnight, the next thing you've got is cloaked people praying to a wall.
And this happened like in the 70s, right? Some kind of, whoever was in power.
Yeah, Iran, it was
changed.
quick.
Yeah.
It wasn't a 10-year draw out.
That's
it was
because your
overnight.
ass would get killed.
Yeah,
if
it
you
was
did.
just an extremist group took
It
charge of the
is.
government.
That
They
was-
took control.
That was, that when the Ayatollah was it? I mean,
I'm not sure. The name.
And maybe that is, I'm just thinking with my heart. I'm not thinking politically. Maybe that is one of the reasons why the left defends them
Well,
more,
I think-
because many of them are being, like you said, many of them are illiterate, not being educated, and this lifestyle is not a choice.
but then of course they, and actually I add me on that too. I'm on this side too. Do not want to be over there doing actions that would help people get literate and vote. We just want troops out of there completely. Just leave them the fuck alone.
Well, it's too risky because you've seen that it doesn't help. We don't help when we go in there and we try to tell somebody, here, do it this way. We don't help them. We hurt them.
You don't interfere. It's just not effective when you interfere with people's culture.
No, and because you're coming in like a parent, that would be like somebody walking into my life and saying, "This is how you need to run your life,
But
Nana."
you can,
No.
and that's kind of what we're seeing. You can change culture through brainwashing.
Yeah, that's right. It's effective. Once again,
I don't know if you've ever seen the video with Yuri Bezmenov. He was a KGB defect from Russia. And in the 80s, he was discussing how they realized they could not beat America in combat. So their intention was, if we can't beat them through strength in numbers and arms, we'll rot them from the inside. Mm-hmm. And so they infiltrated the education system, especially colleges, in like the 50s. It started getting real heavy in the 50s. And he was explaining how they were working to brainwash Americans over the last 30 years at that point.
Right. Weaken the culture.
Yeah, completely changed the culture. And Bezmenov, it's almost terrifying to watch that video because he explains, and this was, 30 years ago now, and he's explaining to a T how brainwashing works. There's no amount of facts, logic, history, patterns, psychology. There's nothing you can do to break that brainwashing once it is complete. And you can change the culture with brainwashing.
Well, the scary thing, especially about places like Russia and China, and I'm just repeating what I heard somebody else say. I can't remember who said it, but that they play the long game. They play over 50 years.
That's what Bezmenov was saying. That was the Cold War. That was a front. The arms race. That was a front. Infiltrating our education system was essential to hitting us from the inside, because once you create these educated people with the brainwashing, then they get into jobs, they get into media, they get into all these different fabric or my brain's facets. Thank you, of your society, and then they start calling the shots over time.
You know, something just dawned on me. That that long game playing type thing that we see, the majority of places that are playing this long game a lot of times, or most of the time, based on the examples that I'm thinking of, it's for malicious intent. It's to destroy another culture so that you can rise up.
Yeah.
It makes me think that with the recent money that went in the COVID-19 stimulus package that went overseas to the Middle East, is the party that was responsible for that playing that long game and trying to weaken the Middle Eastern culture by pumping money into these programs that express their political opinions.
I would say we have been playing
Absolutely.
like what Russia did to us. I would say we've been playing the long game in the Middle East.
Right.
My entire life, almost. We've been over there, like,
right. Well,
interfering with some element of their culture, changing the way they think,
the Russia
bending them to our will.
Russia went in and attacked a lot of different places in the Middle East back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Oh, I mean, Osama bin Laden was trained by us to fight Russia.
Yeah, yeah. So now what I'm wondering is that was when Russia was fighting them on a combat front. And Russia was fighting them in a combat front, and we saw that it wasn't very effective, just like ours. We've had the same thing for the past 20 years. We've been fighting them, and it's been overall pretty non-effective, really, at the end of the day. What I'm wondering is, did Russia figure that out during that time, kind of reform their thinking and say, well, we can't win a military combat situation with them. Let's try this different game with America and play that long game and try to burn their culture from the inside out. And now we're realizing the same thing that Russia did 20, 30 years ago. Hey, we're not going to win via military force in the Middle East. No. Maybe we should send millions and millions of dollars for gender study programs and this and that and all of this stuff that's going to kind of eat away at their specific culture, their specific religion, and make them very, very liberal so that eventually maybe they have weak people and they need us.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm getting at there?
Yeah.
Are we doing what Russia did?
I wouldn't put it beyond.
I completely think we are.
It seems that way, right?
And
why wouldn't we use all the tools that other people had? I no longer feel that America has the moral high ground. I don't feel that way.
Not in a lot of things. I think we've definitely shifted, and you know, conspiracy theories tie into some of the cult-like mentality also, right? I would say a lot of them are governed by conspiracy theories.
Hey, now we're getting towards Sharon and Karen.
Well, like, what is that? What is that? That theory that they have right now? QAnon. Yeah.
Educate me on that. What
Fun
is
times with QAnon.
This will get us demonetized, right. But so, this is educational, right?
Yeah,
we're not condoning this.
You know, I got the Kekistani flag in my basement hanging high, the Pepe the Frog flag, because I think 4chan's just the best thing ever. They're hilarious,
and I know nothing about it really.
Mm-mm.
Well, the fact that 4chan they troll everyone, but we know as people the ones that react the hardest and have meltdowns is the left. The right, they do too, but not nearly at the rate that the left does. 4chan likes to troll people. And who is the easiest target? A snowflake.
Whoever's going to have a strong emotional reaction, because then logic will be out the window.
Exactly.
A 20-year-old who's had every privilege in the world, and they poke the bear a little bit.
So 4chan completely annihilated these people. They make all of the memes that you see. You know, the left can't meme. That's 4chan, you know.
So explain the theory to Nana.
I will, but a little bit of background.
Okay.
Something cool that 4chan did, and this was when I was like, oh man, I'm sold. I'm not rich or smart enough to be a 4chan member. Also, I'm not really that biased one way or another. Trolling people's kind of fun, but it's not something that I'm going to live
it
and
is
breathe
tied
like.
to sociopathy a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So I'm not a 4chan member, but I find it funny what they do. I can't help but like them a little bit. So one of the things that they did that just caused me to fall in love with them was Shia LaBeouf. You guys remember when he went crazy, right?
Yeah.
Screaming Thomas Jefferson into that ATM camera or whatever the hell it was. He was just going completely nuts.
He will not divide
He
us or
went
something,
homeless.
like
Yeah.
screaming at homeless people. Like he just like completely went Section 8.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because he's still making really good movies.
No,
I think it just made him a better actor.
I just said Section 8. I meant AWOL.
So, he was angry about Donald Trump winning presidency. So he ran a flag up, and I think that the flag was a "He will not divide us" flag.
I have no idea.
Well, he ran this up in a field in the middle of Tennessee that he had purchased or was borrowing land from somebody. This is how intense 4chan is. He ran it up, and he said, I'm going to put a camera on this flag that's going to run 24/7, an all-weather cam, and it's going to stay on YouTube, and you can watch it live stream at any point, this flag out in the middle of a field.
Oh,
Until
Shia.
until we get Trump out of office, right? So 4chan was like, all right, we're gonna make this great again. And 4chan watched the camera that was on it and looked at the stars behind it at nighttime and sat there and did some astrology and figured out where this would have to be.
They were able to map.
They
where
were
it
able
was.
to find out the region that it was in.
Oh, wow.
And as time went on,
They used an astro lab.
yeah, they were able
Phoenician science.
to figure out the region that it was in, all the way down to the county, the town, etc. And 4chan paid an army of people to drive around in vehicles honking their horns in this place in Tennessee
until
they
could
could
hear
hear
it
it
in
on
the
the
video.
video. They went out to this field, they took the flag down, and they raised a MAGA hat in place of the flag. How fucking beautiful
So
is
explain.
that?
We only got like 20 minutes here.
I know,
so explain.
but I had to give that out because that's what made me like, what? So anyways, 4chan, to further troll people in this new age, created, in essence, a group like a Reddit type thing, but it's QAnon. And it's pretty much just Alex Jones level crazy ass theories that they're spouting off to not necessarily the Sharons, more so the Karens. But QAnon is for the superbly right-leaning extremists on that end, and also for people that, I don't know how to say this in a nice
Just
way,
say
just
what the theory
aren't
is.
very aren't real intelligent.
Just say what the theory is.
So, well, it's not a theory; it's a group, and they're things that they believe in. Specifically, the conspiracy theories that they come up with. Flat Earth is on there. Hollow Earth is on there. The Earth is pretty much brand new; it's not very old. All of these either right-leaning or unintelligent theories are on there.
There's also this stuff with the one world government and all these things like the Obama administration was into that.
And it gets real deep.
Was weakening America to join with the UN. And
so there's conspiracies that almost sound real like that are so borderline that you can't hardly tell it's a conspiracy theory. You know, their 9/11 was created by the government, etc. So there's a lot of things on there that you're like, maybe, we don't know. But then also there's the Democratic Party is controlled by the reptilian
Is that
aliens.
like the Illuminati thing?
Well, the Illuminati.
I don't understand that.
Well,
But we don't have to go into that. Something about the reptilian.
That would be one of the conspiracy theories that are a little bit more legit. Like there's actually a little bit of evidence behind that.
Oh, okay.
And when you're talking about the Illuminati, you're talking about things like Moloch the owl god, where they sacrifice the effigies. And Alex Jones actually infiltrated one of those. No, that's a real thing. There's video footage of it.
Oh, I'll
Where
have
a bunch
to
of high-level politicians
educate myself on
wear
that.
robes and chant and shit. It's a thing that they do.
We're talking about, extremism and the cult and stuff. and conspiracy theories do tie into a lot of those cults.
Yeah.
And because it's all in the thought process.
Well, it's a fear, right?
And
There's
'cause
no
they
conspiracy
use,
theory
a lot
that
of times
doesn't
they
have
use fear
some
as
kind
a
of
motivator,
fear.
right? Fear is a motivator for a lot of things. Fear is how Jim Jones got people to drink Kool-Aid. And the problem with conspiracy theories is now what you're talking about with like the owl people or whatever, that's fucking batshit crazy. Like
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely bordering on psychotic. And I'm going to talk about the continuum of.
But that one's. I just want to say that one's not a conspiracy. That actually happened.
Okay, and
okay.
There really are not owl people, except maybe in World of Warcraft you have moonkins.
No, but
Moonkins.
people really were
They
doing
are a bitch to kill
the
somehow.
pagan ritual type celebration of it, and there was politicians there, and they were called out afterwards, and they like denied
Yeah,
it.
but there's not actual owl people.
No.
That's my fucking point. Anyway, so with a conspiracy, there are often some elements of truth in there, like some of the stuff with the Obama administration actually found through investigation that was true, you know, and some of the stuff that Julian Assange had leaked, you know, with Podesta emails and Clinton and all that, there was actual evidence of that. So the problem is, with conspiracy theories, the way the brain operates, it takes information. It doesn't like a whole bunch of things randomly occurring. It wants to consolidate and create little patterns and pathways so it can easily understand and store information, right? So it takes all these little bits and pieces, some true, some not, and it just lumps them all and connects them in places where they're not necessarily connected, right? It's like, oh, well, all these things happened. Well, a lot of them may be actual factual, but then they do mind games to link them all together and say, well, look, it's Illuminati.
And that mind game process is very
It's
akin
Freemasons
to like
pulling these strings.
magicians.
George Soros. Well, and there's evidence that George Soros pulled strings.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm saying is that when people are referring to QAnon, there's sections of QAnon like Hollow Earth and Flat Earth that I'm like, well, that's silly.
It doesn't fact check at all.
There's not. The Democrats aren't eating children and being ran by reptilian aliens, but then there's also a side where 9/11, the government may have had something to do with that, or at least known about it. There's a section like what you were just referring to. So I mean, there's a good section of QAnon, but it's ruined by those wacky conspiracy theories.
And that's where it moves into the
ask,
cult-like mentality.
But I have to ask myself, is that real? You've got a lot of people that are part of QAnon, that movement, I guess you could say, that have legitimate conspiracy theories. Are all of these silly ones just infiltrated to take away from those real possibility conspiracy theories?
And that would be like conspiracy level. What that is, that's kind of your brain is saying that's so extreme and stupid, like it doesn't fit. So is there a reason why that doesn't fit? So you start saying people say, oh, with the Capitol Hill attacks, oh, Antifa infiltrated.
Right.
Well, there's not really any evidence to support that.
Well,
There's not, but just logical conclusion would kind of lead a person to think
and
that.
So that's how you go down that primrose path, right?
But isn't that the same tactic that magicians use? You know, it's like this trickery to tie a ridiculous thing to a legitimate thing.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
you're talking about like it's a diversion tactic.
Yeah,
Smoke
but
and mirrors.
There's so many things that people don't even understand. That, you know, like the things that advertisers use. You know, there's the trickery to that. I think that needs to be exposed. Like the how to. How do they get you? You know, how do they get you then believe, you know, the Karens believe in, like some points sound very legitimate that, okay, well, I trust this site. I trust these people. Maybe I can entertain this ridiculous thing.
Right.
And then it becomes their ideology over time. Cause like you said, it just kind of gets beat into them.
If you're not challenging yourself, it's kind of like Biggie said like an hour ago. If you're not constantly challenging this information that you come up with,
you're gonna get confirmation.
You're just going to keep going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, for sure. And it does get out of control, which brings me to my point about Sharons and Karens. Sharons and Karens are a real thing, people. I looked up a lot of different posts and different articles that are addressing this, to where middle-age, middle class,
white women.
yeah, white women are losing their minds now over conspiracy theories and legitimate concerns about politics. It's coming to the point where I was reading some of the different articles were saying that, you know, my mother's been locked in her room for a week. She won't speak to me and my father. Anytime I speak to her, it immediately goes towards politics and hate of either the left or the right. She can't have a conversation outside of this, and she promises that as soon as this election stuff is done, then she's finished.
It's
but I'm
always
convinced,
something new.
right? And well, they cheated. So now we're going to look at that for 6 months, and now we're going to look at this next thing for 6 months, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And
There
is
was-
it driving people
Yeah, it was
crazy?
like-
Literally.
And it's been going on for like what, 4 or 5 years. It's
But
like
now, but before it was going on more so, in my opinion, with the left. But now it's seeped over to where I'm concerned about not only the Sharons but the Karens.
4 years ago it was Russian collusion. We spent millions of taxpayer dollars to investigate the biggest nothing burger in our history.
Yeah.
And now you have voter fraud.
Mm-hmm.
You know, George Soros. You know,
And how much money is going to be paid and how much time is going to be spent. And I'm legitimately concerned about this Sharon Karen issue, because that's an entire group of people now that have lost their minds. It's not happening to the males. It's not happening to younger women. It's
Are we
50
talking about people my age older than me?
no people that are in their 50s.
are you middle aged?
Well, if you
I guess if
consider
you
my
die at
age
80,
40, you know, is that middle aged?
if you die at 80, it is.
But yeah, no, it's a legitimate
No,
concern,
they,
and I'm
they tend to be
wondering
older than you.
how long is it going to be before actual psychology, before they term this, before it's actually a, you know, how Trump derangement syndrome type. When are we actually going to make that and the Sharons and Karens
What
a
I would
mental
ask
disorder?
is why aren't people more in tune with their own lives?
Yeah.
That's the issue, is they're getting dragged away from their own
When
lives.
you
They're
look
not
at-
hygiening, they're smoking too much, they're drinking themselves to death, they're ruining family
One of
relationships
the-
over shit that has nothing to do with them.
One of the greatest philosophical books of our time, well, not our time. Well, our time is in the human species, I
Human
suppose.
time.
Human time is Candide from Voltaire. And one of the things that Candide is, are you guys familiar with it?
No, I'm gonna write it down though.
So there is and I believe he's either Hindu or Muslim, and it's during the British rule. I think it's British. I don't. Maybe they're tradesmen. God, it's been so long since I read it. It doesn't matter. So they had this gardener and a farmer. He was living his life, doing what he needed to do to support his family and his way of life. And they were having all these power struggles with the sultans and stuff. And everything around him was basically on fire. And Candy's just like, so how can you just be happy and focus on your garden? And he's like, well, sultans come and go. You know, all I can do is cultivate my garden. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like the philosophy, is cultivate your own garden. If you just focus on your small little world and yourself and your family and your basic needs, a lot of the outside things don't impact you. And so what we're seeing this is kind of like Peterson had talked about, learn how to clean your own bedroom, which is in a way almost similar. Mm-hmm. You don't take on the world's issues until you deal with your shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And because if you don't deal with your own shit, you are more open to suggestion. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about. You're vulnerable to suggestion if you don't take care of your shit. Like Thomas Aquinas, talking about the God-shaped heart, And we all have that little hole that gets filled, and maybe it's drugs, maybe it's politics, maybe it's religion. And so if you don't learn to cultivate your own garden, you're very open to suggestion, and all these things can influence you and drive you insane. Things that you have no control over.
And that's my biggest point, was when I was talking to said person, I said, this is something that whether you pay attention to this 24/7 and are obsessed with it or not is not going to change the end result. This person made themselves sound like they were a warrior in a battle.
Oh, that's exactly. I had that same conversation with someone, and I got irritated, and I said, "What are you going to do? Go run out with your AR-15 and start shooting people?"
Right.
Because we're in a war of ideas. We're not in a hot war. This is a war of ideas. Don't be bringing guns to a war of ideas.
And my perspective is be grateful that you're allowed to have an idea. That goes all the way. I mean, it's very basic, but there's so many people that they're not even allowed. Like we were talking about some of the Muslims, they're not even allowed to have an original thought.
And what scares people is there are people that are afraid that they will no longer have the freedom of ideals.
Well,
and ideas,
the thing is,
not if you have gratitude, and that's just my opinion.
Maybe this is a little QAnon of me, but I'm concerned. I mean, I think everybody is for the most part, that with digital censorship that's coming out right now, it's a stranglehold on those. And I appreciate private companies as a libertarian, but man, when you shut that down, that has a lot of influence to people.
Well, and it's very terrifying to somebody who knows history when there's politicians talking about re-education camps. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing: it's not everybody saying that. It's just a couple of them, and they tend to be kind of insane anyway, and a little cult-like, brainwashed. So it's not everybody saying that, but the fact that there's someone saying that with political power is scary, right? But you got to be careful not to go down that rabbit hole of saying that they're all after that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think it's an exercise in self-management. I think I'm very grateful that I do have whatever is wonky in my brain that I can just choose to avoid it, not focus on something like that. And I guess my heart should go out more to people who get consumed with the fear of it.
So what I wanted to talk to you guys on the psychological level is on the continuum. Everything with the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, is big. You know what that is, right?
Yeah.
With the diagnoses.
Yep.
So everything's on a continuum. And it's actually, as much as I was so used to the DSM-4 TR, like, the 5 makes sense on a lot of different things, especially like neurocognitive disorders and such. But one of the things I love is it being on a continuum. That it starts with cognitive distortion and can actually lead to psychosis. Do you know what a cognitive distortions are, or what they are?
Just based on context of what you said, I mean, it kind of, no, I more or less understand what it means.
So there's a list of them. There's a lot of them, and I did a dad philosophy on mind reading, and that's one of them, where you think you know what the other person's thinking, even if that's not exactly what they're verbalizing. You're projecting your thoughts and feelings onto that person, right? And there's other ones, and another big one is like denial, where you're blocking new information, right? So we all have cognitive distortions, and they can lead to, that thought pattern will lead to certain emotions, which will lead to certain behaviors, which strengthen these faulty patterns, which strengthen those emotions, which in turn creates more extreme behavior. And you create this recursive loop of basically mental anguish and suffering. But you can actually switch it around and create a recursive loop of positive thoughts and to get healthier, right? I hope this is making sense.
It's making sense. It's a choice to have a different.
This is basic cognitive.
Right?
Basic cognitive restructuring. You change the thoughts, you change the emotions, which changes the behavior. And the problem is it can go both ways, to the unhealthy extreme or the happy extreme. And obviously, the happy extreme is going to be a little bit more helpful than the negative extreme, but it could probably lead you to suggestion too.
Probably not. Yeah, I mean that's the happy extreme of happy is delusion.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. So you absolutely just nailed it. So if you live in cognitive distortion long enough, on the next on the continuum are delusional thoughts. And a lot of those delusional thoughts, there is a gray area. There could be truth to it. Kind of like talking about conspiracy theories, right? Some elements of conspiracy theories are true. And that's what grabs you to it at first. And it's like, oh, well, I'm reading all this information. I found out this is actually facts checks and this is true. And so it can progress into delusion. And with delusion, it starts getting a little psychotic-y, but not full-blown. But the longer you stay in that delusional thinking, the more you start pushing into full-blown psychosis.
That's right.
And we see this with people. That's how depression and anxiety can end up with psychosis. And is this making sense how this ties into what we're talking about? So you can actually start with cognitive distortions and denial and rationalization, all these, and mind reading, and all these different cognitive distortions, minimizing, and end up into that full-blown, extreme, delusional, psychotic thinking.
And this is where, I think it ties in
and this
perfectly.
is where Karens and Sharons come in.
Exactly, because I am concerned that right now this is something that is just on surface level and something that is not affecting necessarily a person.
Well, there's going to be Biden derangement syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. So right now we've got it though to where it's at a manageable level. These people can still cook meals, they can still go to work, etc. But I do get concerned that just like we saw with Trump derangement syndrome, they kept getting more and more unhinged to where they weren't showering for days.
No,
they were obsessing.
And they spent like most of their life out protesting without doing anything to take care of themselves.
So I get concerned that this is actually going to become unmanageable.
I think that's a fair fear because the problem is when it's a pendulum, right?
And it's really wild though that it's not happening to the younger the younger generation is handling this better. Like I'm talking the generation from 20 to 40.
Well, I would say okay. Well, I don't know because with Trump derangement syndrome, I would say it was younger people losing their shit more. But with Biden derangement syndrome, it seems to be older people.
Yes, I agree that. Out of the two,
the kids
one is
screaming
younger
into
versus
the wind
one is,
weren't 60 years old.
Right. And maybe it's the people that I associate with that are older, so that's probably what
the Sharons and Karens are definitely they're not millennials and they're not Gen Zs.
Right.
They're Gen X and boomers.
Yeah.
And whereas the Trump derangement syndrome, for the most part, I was seeing millennials.
Well, I'm thinking of two specific ones that were the Sharons of the situation that I'm referring to that were in their 60s, late
and
50s,
I think
60s.
If I had to...
So they do exist, but I do agree that it's heavier.
If I had to put forth a guess, it's because the older people are more afraid of losing those constitutional rights that they have had for a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. That'd be my guess.
And what are the younger people more fearful of?
They're whatever social media tells them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which specifically would be mass shootings that happen at least once every 15 minutes.
Somebody wants to put out to change the way you think and feel.
My question is, how does the narrative support what they want? Because you gave an example of someone who basically had the fight. That is the narrative that they want. They want this person to feel that way. The media.
Well, and of course that would tie into the conspiracy that maybe the media was egging these people on, like Capitol Hill, to do something extreme so the government could then justify laws.
And that's going back to what I was saying earlier, when there's no reason for us to get in there and disband something that we disagree with. We're going to find a reason. And if not, we'll create a reason from scratch.
Well,
reason to infiltrate.
What did Stalin say? Was that Stalin that said, show me a man, I'll show you his crime? Or is that one of his KGB leaders?
I'm not sure. That's a good one, though.
I think it might have been one of his KGB
I think you might be right. Yeah, seems like me and you.
Yeah,
have
show me a man, and I'll show you his crime.
Yeah,
and and there's history of that's the thing with conspiracy theories, right? Yes, well, it's so easy to go down that rabbit hole if you don't catch yourself, because there's history of that happening.
Yeah,
right. There's history of how the Nazis brainwashed people and demonized and scapegoated Jewish people, and you can see it on a smaller degree now. When people start talking about re-education camps, that's absolutely fucking terrifying.
that's happened. Yeah.
Now, it's because it happened in America. Look what we did to
Yeah.
Japanese people in
I
World
was
War
just
II.
going to say
Yep.
that. Yep.
And
Yep.
we took Japanese people away from their fucking home and we put them in internment camps.
Japanese American citizens.
Yeah,
Like these weren't
actual fucking citizens.
Yeah, these weren't POWs. Like these were your nana.
Yeah.
And because she had Japanese roots, now she needs to be re-educated into Americanism.
Do you
That's
remember
terrifying.
in The Karate Kid, he was a freaking war hero.
Yeah,
and
and he had to go into-
his wife had died
Yep.
in an internment camp while
That's
he
right.
was bleeding in Italy.
Yeah.
It's
I remember that.
fucking-
That's very specific.
such a great movie.
Callie, that's awesome that you...
Such a great movie.
Yeah.
And that's such a gut-wrenching scene when he's drunk, and it's either the anniversary of her death or their wedding anniversary.
I think
can't
it was
remember.
their wedding anniversary.
I've never seen The Karate Kid. I didn't know it had some depth to it.
Oh, it's a great fucking
well,
movie.
Pat Morita was phenomenal.
Is
in
that
it.
what the Cobra Kai thing is based
Yes,
off of?
it's based
okay.
on that.
I've never seen
Yeah,
any of it.
God, you need to
I
watch
really,
it.
I
Really?
didn't know you. Yeah, that was a really good
So,
movie.
so there's history in
That
America.
is such a contradiction, though. Off fighting the war and his wife is. I see. That's
Yeah.
some
No,
deep shit.
There is, yeah. Well, and you could say, oh, what about that guy who's a Republican who's over fighting in Afghanistan right now, and then they take his wife and kid and move them into a
Yeah.
Republican re-education camp.
That would be some shit.
But so there is a precedent in our country of that happening.
Yeah.
So that's why there's people that are terrified.
yeah.
And you know that movie, going back to that's probably the only example of any mainstream admission or of that happening.
And they got all these Americans to be okay with that.
Yeah.
That's fucking terrifying. That's a level
that's
of
fascism.
brainwash. That's fascism.
Yeah.
Well, that's Roosevelt. People. I'm not going to get started on Roosevelt. We don't have time. He did some scary ass shit.
Yeah.
And
I remember watching that
He also
movie
stacked
and-
the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But anyway, and you could argue that with the last president. You could argue that with what the new president is talking about.
Yeah.
There people who know history are probably having anxiety,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. But you have to reel it in, because if you let yourself get deeper and deeper into that, you're making yourself susceptible for the extreme thoughts that cause a lot of cognitive distortions, which can go to delusional thinking, which can go to psychosis.
And I think it's really important to note that staring at social media and staring at mainstream news and watching what's currently going on in the government, it's an issue because at the end of the day, you're not doing anything to change it. And I'm not saying you should. What I'm saying is if you're not going to go do something to change it, then why watch the minute by minute, play by play shit of what's going on? The way that I look at it is at the end of the week, I'll hear it from somebody. Oh, that's what's going on. And if it's something that I think pertains to me specifically, I'll look it up. But at the end of the day, me sitting there staring at the news and obsessing over this for my entire life is not going to make any difference of
Why
what
do
the outcome
people
is.
ignore the power that they could potentially have, and that is locally?
Oh,
They
100%.
They completely
Your
ignore what's
local
going on.
elections are vastly more
people
important.
have been absolutely ignoring local elections.
Yeah,
And-
that's the worst thing you can do because that's really your only voice. is the local elections. I mean, you can vote for the president all you want, but at the end of the day, we got
Or
the electoral
sitting in
college.
and-
But to control the electoral college, you need to participate in your
and
local
the funny
elections.
thing is, like, you can have, look at what's happening. You know, you can have a governor that makes laws, but your local people don't have to enforce them.
Yeah.
The laws that your governor makes are only so powerful if the local authorities aren't going to enforce them, right?
Well, how about this? I never got the hazard pay from the county that I used to work in because I no longer work there. But I did the job for that 6 months. I called them. They're like, "Well,
Y'all got hazard pay?
you were supposed to get it
I ain't get no hazard pay.
if you were with that specific county. They passed the hazard
I
pay."
don't even know what we're talking about.
Apparently, I don't know.
Well, just an example of
Let's not get into that. We
not
only got
getting.
like 5 minutes here.
Well, it's just an example of we don't know what the hell's going on locally.
Oh,
that
well,
is
That's all.
true.
fair enough.
I'll agree with that.
I don't go to local committees or councils.
Yeah, I can't make
Well,
fun of
because it's
anybody or talk
boring.
shit because I haven't been to the town square in at least a month.
Well, it's boring, right? These
It's like watching C-SPAN.
yeah, this back and forth arguing.
Just, instead of watching
shit
it, you're just
is
there.
is interesting.
Motion number 8942. Discussing
Congressman has the floor.
Discussing parking spaces outside of the courthouse.
Yeah, that's usually what it is
bashing
too. It's
your head
like
into the
Jesus. Okay, so we do only have 5 minutes, so let's go over.
What I want to look at in the last 5 minutes, and I don't want to totally bogart this.
Well, then we're going to need like 10 minutes because we need to recap what we do,
Well, that's what
and
I-
you're not squirming out of your answer because you have yet to answer.
Right.
Yep.
No more kindas.
I want us so that we can help people and ourselves. How do you keep yourself from, because the theme here was obviously cults, but just also how you can progress from just cognitive distortions to total, like, full-blown psychosis and delusional thinking where you're easily susceptible to brainwashing. Right? And we're seeing it, and it's there, but there are people who are thinking critically and not allowing themselves, and there are people who are just completely drinking the Kool-Aid. And so what I want to look at, and this is a good recap, what can we do to, if we're seeing ourselves moving towards an extreme, what can we do to challenge and combat that?
Well, I think what Nana mentioned earlier about recognizing your weak points and not allowing those to be intercepted, not allowing those to be utilized against you, is everything. So that's like a military strategy of looking at where's my weakest point. That's where I want to buffer my defenses.
So it starts with honesty and self-introspection. We have to be aware of what our weakest, most vulnerable points are so that we can focus in on improving them. So
absolutely. So mine was the authority issue.
living in the woods with your compound,
Yeah, my Dobermans.
your army of one.
Yeah. we're effective. Okay. Come on my third of an acre and find out. So yeah, that's mine. Nana's, what was yours? Do you care to give your little recap?
What about of the entire episode?
No.
of
Your weakness that would allow susceptibility from cult-like behavior would lead to that.
Yeah, it's the idea of that I'm a perfectionist. I have that whatever that perfectionist disease is, and I would need to be aware of the fact if I'm exposed to somebody who might recognize that, then and try to exploit that. You know, I need to be aware that I have a tendency, and to remember that's not who I am. You know, I don't. That's a part of me, and it's all about balance, right? So a part of me, my personality, drives me to do better, learn more, but you know, not allowing that to go to an extreme to where I'm, you know, for example, I'm I turn into some woman who gets into a relationship where the man constantly pushes her
You can
his thumb.
They can you can allow yourself to be gaslit.
Yeah, like I'm susceptible to a narcissist.
So more or less,
Someone who feeds into that deficit that you have and builds you up artificially.
Yeah, and wants to exploit that.
And then once
for
they got
his
that
gain.
control, then they pull you down.
so
Yeah.
kind of a wolf promising you or offering you the hollow promise of perfectionism, I guess you could say.
or exploiting my my character defects because I know them better than my strengths. And I'm like, oh, okay, he's right. Whoever. Oh yeah, I need to be better. I need to work harder to get to his standard, because that's what good narcissists do, right? They make you believe that you are not to their standard, and that you need to work up to that.
And personality disorders, because they're extreme in nature, are easy to manipulate too. Because once you understand how that personality disorder operates, you can change the way you communicate to appease that and manipulate and twist them.
That's right. It's a vicious fucking cycle.
Like prisons deal with narcissists and antisocial personality disorder all day long, and you can learn how to work with those personality disorders to manipulate them. I don't necessarily mean a malicious manipulation, right?
Might even be a manipulation from a psychologist to get them back on track.
And
Yeah.
also,
And that's because with therapy, there's a certain degree of manipulation anyway. It's just altruistic.
Yeah.
and know your cognitive distortion. My cognitive distortion is that I have not done it, which is really fucked up because I have, but that I have not done enough to help people and to make other people's lives better.
So it's real easy to get you to feel bad about not doing enough for other people.
Yeah, but objectively, you look at my resume and
You got a whole
have
you got a whole lifetime
the
of it.
entire thing.
Yeah, you got a whole lifetime of helping people.
Yeah.
But it's never enough.
Right. So then if there is a person who is more of that narcissistic, evil kind of mind, I think they're evil, but like they would exploit that and say, well, she doesn't think, she has this cognitive distortion. How does that benefit me? And they will make it benefit them when they haven't really done shit.
Yeah.
To help people.
Yep.
It's really all fucked up. So yeah, I think it just goes back to awareness of your weaknesses, your tendency,
Awareness, honesty, balance, and because I was thinking, I guess we can end with me not weaseling out.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. With me, it's somewhere between you two. I have this weird side of me that could almost be like schizoid, like living in the mountain, like away from, shunning all society, like some hermit sage. And
Or like a monk.
yeah, well, kind of living this monastic life, but it could easily go from a monastic life to like full-blown like asceticism. Like Buddha had experimented with that. He already found there's no truth in it. Starving yourself. He was eating like a grape fig leaf a day. And then he passed out in a small creek and almost drowned to a little kid, picked him up and offered him milk and saved his life. And he realized at that point there's no truth in denying yourself all that, that extreme religious puritanicalism that causes you to basically harm yourself. It's all about balance and moderation, right? And that middle path. But I could, like, and my family helps to reel it in. Like, if I didn't have a wife and kids, I'd probably just be off in the woods. I would probably sold my place and just bought some acreage out in the middle of nowhere and just be meditating on a mountain. And, you know, and so, you know, you have to look at things to reel yourself in. But that is my thing. And I wouldn't, it could progress to that cult. Like, you know, none of us are in that cult, like mine. We're all critical thinkers, but the hypothetical was which direction would you go in?
Okay, so just to recap it in 2 words, mine for each one of us. Mine would be rebellion and a compound somewhere that's probably political in nature. That's where I would end up, and that's my flaw that would get me there. Yours would be
A
based
literal
on
cult leader exploiting me.
right, an actual cult leader, or just a guy in a relationship exploiting a weakness and causing you to be in some type of unhealthy relationship, be it a cult or a romantic relationship.
But that's not a cult.
Right, it's not a cult, but it's a cult-like behavior.
There is
if
some
you're
degree of brainwashing that occurs there. So over time, if you are in a relationship that's abusive, that is a long. You talk about, you know, the long war, right?
It's a person-to-person.
You can break them
relationship.
Yeah, and I think that type of personality is susceptible to a literal cult leader if gone unchecked. So that's why
because
I say
if it's not romantic,
cult.
it can just be plutonic or spiritual.
Yeah, you know, that person could project such perfection, and I'd be like blindsided by that. You know?
Yeah, makes sense.
You know, political too. It's like, oh, I see these people. They talk about these politicians like they're fucking Christ Almighty. I'm like, they just say whatever the fuck they want you to hear for a vote.
Exactly.
You have no reason to trust these people.
Yeah.
They have no track record that shows that you should trust them.
Right.
So Callie's would be a introverted monk living inside of his own head,
like
in the
Bodhidharma, like in the cave, cutting his eyelids off so he can't sleep.
But
So
what
that's
would your
where-
ideology be to where you would?
Exactly. We know where you would be, but did you explain to us what the flaw that would lead you to that place was?
Oh, well, I would say that. I didn't finish my thought, did I? Because yours is kind of the living off on your own crazy compound, and yours is the perfectionism. Well, that is like spiritual perfectionism. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's kind of like a hybrid of both of you.
Makes
like,
sense.
Like eschewing society for spiritual perfection to a fault.
Yeah, and you would think you were like the shit.
Like floating in air, existing outside of time and space.
Yeah.
And there would be people who would probably find me and treat me like that.
Yeah, because you would be doing
Now
like
you're the cult leader.
Yeah.
I would find you because you would be doing some self-sacrifice and shit, and I'd be like,
all the fucking nanas would come looking for me.
You would be the unwilling cult leader, and like we said earlier,
look at how
and like we said earlier, your best politicians would be the ones that are unwilling to do it. He might be the best cult leader. We don't know until we try.
And then the guns from the government are pointed at my little mountain retreat with all my nanas.
Yeah, and I would be the first one defending you. You don't understand the way he sacrifices.
You'd be looking out at the tree
I would
line.
be your
Who is
biggest
that?
champion.
Who is that guy planting claymores out there? I would be like, I want part of this because I see you guys got good walls. Let's make good defenses and make a stand because the government's here. And I'm not even for your cult. I'm just not for them. So
I think
this is what we're doing.
I think that's
funny.
I think that's a great way to end this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. You know the words.
All right. Let's cue the music. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Biggie Callie Show. It's been a crazy ride, and Nana's here, you know. So come on back next week and give us a friendly ear. We'll have ourselves a merry time and drink American beer.